but not yet, not without listening to the next panels that are coming up, because we have 2 panels that will come up now. We have one panel, the road to enlargement, which will take place in this room. But if you're interested in assisting to the panel on the EU financial sector, that panel will take place on the 3rd floor in the delegates room. And let me also underline that for those watching us online, both panels will be streamlined. And for those who want to assist to the panel Road to Enlargement, welcome. You're welcome to stay in this room. Based on the European Commission's latest enlargement package, the launch of the new growth plan for the Western Balkans and also the Ukraine facility, the panel 6, Road to Enlargement, will now look into the role finance institutions can jointly play in accompanying, accessing countries on their path to EU integration. And I think it's a very, very timely discussion in the light of last week's special European Council that allowed the EU to provide Ukraine with a predictable support of loans and grants of 50 billion euros over the next 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, and I also think that the ability of the EU to deliver and to remain united is, of course, a very, very strong signal for the whole region. And I have now the pleasure to invite Teresa Czerwinska, Vice President of the European Investment Bank, to come up on stage. She will set the scene of this panel. I also invite all the panelists to come on stage. Yes, and this panel will be moderated by Vasil Tofan, who is the senior partner and member of the investment committee of Horizon Capital. And I will just wait for all our panelists to have taken their seats. Good morning. And Ms. Czerwinska, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see you all and welcome once again to Luxembourg. Yesterday it was a very productive day, very rich in terms of agenda, discussions, and I'm very happy to see that also you have an opportunity to network, and the EIB Group Forum is a very, very lively forum as a meeting point on the conference map. Ladies and gentlemen, great pleasure to welcome you also to the panel, The Road to Enlargement. And we are here today to delve into the EU's enlargement process, a key policy driving our union's peace and prosperity, a peace that is currently challenged by the wars, pandemic, and the global economic shifts that we are facing and striving to overcome. 20 years ago, on the 1st of May 2004, the EU enlarged from 15 to 25 member states, and with 2 subsequent enlargements to 28 member states later. It brought stability and reunited Europe after years of artificial division during the Cold War. It made the EU the world's biggest single market and increased trade between member states, thus contributing to economic growth and strengthening further Europe's weight in global affairs. And now we are witnessing another historical period. Last year, the European Union took a significant step by opening the accession talks with Ukraine, Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and granting the EU candidate status for Georgia. And I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Ukraine, Sergei Nikolavchuk, present today, on reaching this significant milestone with the EU opening accession negotiations. This is a crucial advancement for Ukraine. As the EU bank, we always stood firmly with Ukraine, continuing our support throughout the war and in financing critical sectors such as energy infrastructure, transportation, municipal services. And our support for Ukraine since the beginning of the war has reached more than 2 billion euros, and we continue to support Ukraine with solidarity package, technical assistance, and EU for Ukraine fund, contributing to building resilience and supporting real economy in Ukraine. But ladies and gentlemen, the EU's approach to enlargement is not just about expanding borders. It is about strengthening cohesion and the bonds that unite us as Europeans, especially when we are facing war at the eastern border. Single market not only offers their citizens and businesses new opportunities for travel and trade, but also creates jobs and bolsters prosperity and stability in their countries. Enlargement also benefits the society at large, introducing requirements in terms of tackling corruption, accelerating the implementation of higher standards on environment protection, economic governance, and the strengthening of democratic institutions. And today's panel will also focus on the importance of our collective determination to continue the EU enlargement experience to be indeed a remarkable story of success. So what is the role of EIB and other financial institutions in this process? How to accompany countries in the region in this very important process? You all know that EIB was created 65 years ago to serve as an instrument to deepen European economic integration, and during this time has provided financial resources and technical expertise to all acceding countries. Today, under our dedicated arm, EIB Global, we are as committed as ever to supporting the enlargement process. We help countries aiming to join the EU by funding key areas like infrastructure, healthcare, education, and transport. These investments go beyond finance. They are our commitment to a shared future in Europe, driving sustainable growth and unity. Our investments are conditional on ensuring European standards in many areas spanning from climate to fundamental rights, and therefore help strengthening the democratic values. Our modus operandum is to work in close cooperation with the countries in the region, the European Commission, international financial institutions and EU member states, particularly through the Western Balkans investment framework. So like all of us here today, we don't underestimate the many challenges faced by the region. Reforms and strategic investments need to be accelerated, and we believe that the Commission's ambitious new growth plan for the Western Balkans can provide a need and much needed impetus. And this goes hand in hand with active EIB presence on the ground. Since 2009, EIB has provided nearly 11 billion euros in public and private sector investment finance in the Western Balkans. And we will continue to support important regional activities such as green and digital agenda and the common regional market. Going forward, we are determined to accompany the region in this very important process, cooperate with our important partners, and I look at the distinguished panelists present here today, Prime Minister Rama, Deputy Governor of the Ukrainian National Bank, Boris Vujčić. Croatia indeed is a success story of enlargement, so today, but also I look at Gert Koopman, European Commission, and last but not least, our great partner on the ground. We are co-financing many projects. Odile Renou-Basso, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So looking forward for very, very inspiring discussion. How can we make it happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Czerwinska, for your opening remarks. And thank you, EIB, for your leadership in putting this panel together on such an important topic. And for me, it's a huge privilege to be moderating such a distinguished panel today on the topic of enlargement. And on a personal note, if I may, for me, enlargement is actually personal. I am a native of Moldova. I spent the last 12 years in Ukraine. I met the war in Ukraine. And for us, in that part of the world, but also for Western Balkans, this is a question of our future, and it's a question of our present. So I hope we'll have the chance today with this very distinguished panel to uncover this topic of enlargement. Please be bold, be insightful, be high energy. Let's make this panel a very interesting one, and let it be the panel that people will remember from the EIB Global Forum. And we'll start with opening remarks, and I'm very pleased to offer the word first to Odile Renaud-Bassot, the President of EBRD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for EIB for inviting me, and very happy to participate with this panel, because in a way, the EBRD history is very, and what we've been delivering is very closely related to the first phase of EU enlargement, and when entering into, or trying to make progress on the second phase, I think it's quite important to learn from what we've done and what we've been doing. The EBRD has been created in the context of the collapse of the Soviet Union, fall of the Berlin Wall, and really the mandate was to help countries to provide financial support to develop market economies and support democracy and development of the private sector. So it was really a mandate to turn around and to support the transition of post-communist countries to market functioning economies and so forth. And in that sense, it was a lot about financing, and EBRD has been set up as a bank to provide financing, in particular to the private sector, but also to key infrastructure that are needed for facilitating economic development and so forth. But it was also a lot about policy reform, macroeconomic stability, starting from really the basic of macroeconomic stability, but also how do you create a functioning market economy with rule of law being implemented, functioning judicial system, regulatory environment for businesses, and so forth. And part of the journey, when you look at the first wave of enlargement, part of the journey has really been the transformation of a number of countries towards this well-functioning market economy. And our experience showed that the process of EU enlargement has been very instrumental in, and we worked very closely hand in hand with the EU Commission in order to support this process, and bringing together financial instruments, financial investment, and reform agenda is very important. So as a bank, we work on financing, but also on the reform agenda. But having the support of the EU enlargement process has been extremely effective. And in a way, we can see the results. It's the success of EU countries, looking from Poland, all the Eastern European countries, in catching up, in economic growth, in convergence, economic convergence with the rest of the EU. I think this was driven by financing, country reform, but also very much the enlargement process and all the process to gain the acquis. So it's a huge effort, I think, but it's very consistent with and very important in as a stabilizing factor and as an anchor for economic development and becoming full functioning market economy, attractive economy with high growth potential. So we are very active in the countries looking for enlargement, in the process of enlargement, in the Western Balkans, and but also Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. And our I think really our objective is to finance projects, to finance the private sector, to do that together with while supporting the policy reform, and it can be on our approach is quite targeted on what needs to be done or what is useful for enhancing the growth potential. So, for example, now a lot of focus on the green agenda, how to ensure better energy efficiency, decarbonization, and so forth, but also factors that will unlock investment, being foreign investors or domestic investment. One of the key focus, for example, is also to develop local currency market, financial market locally, strengthen the banking sector, and so forth, to have the underpinning elements in sustaining economic growth. Our level of investment, and we work very closely with the EU Commission, building on EU instruments in order to share the risk, have some grant support to develop technical assistance, but also developing blending instrument. And our level of support is significant in terms of GDP, because, for example, for the Western Balkans last year, our investment represents 1% of GDP, which is quite significant. And overall, our level of investment since we've been created 40 billion for the Western Balkans, but with, as I was saying, strong focus on the private sector, and this work on the strategic reform, which I believe is very important. One last point I wanted to make is accession is a big, when being in the EU and having access to the EU market is a big enabler and a big driver for growth, and it's also opening market opportunities. And that's why I really very much welcome the approach and the action, the growth plan, which has been launched by the Commission with progressive access to EU market, because I believe it's a very important opening and give opportunities for investment. But when entering the EU doesn't mean that all the issues are sorted out. And we see that in a number of countries where you see issues related to rule of law, governance, corruption, and so forth, still needed to be addressed. And therefore, the continuation of transformation reform agenda is true in all EU countries, but you can see sometimes after enlargement a kind of fatigue, and this needs to be really continued. And that's why I believe the work done on the context of the RRF and so forth is a very important one.
Thank you, Madam President. And we'll continue with the Prime Minister Rama for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. You asked a panel to be remembered, but to be remembered, I have to attack EBRD. And I'm not going to do so. So I would simply share with the audience my state of mind. Actually, I'm in a post-traumatic period because I had to go through a long trauma with the European Union while we were insisting to open accession talks, and they were insisting in telling us that they wanted us for sure, but they were not ready to talk. So imagine wanting to be married and the other side says, I love to marry you, but I don't want to talk to you. It's quite a traumatic experience. But this is over now. We have started accession talks, and in this post-traumatic era, I'm much more keen to praise the EU than to blame the EU. And the praise, I believe, is completely deserved because we are seeing the incredibly beneficial service that the EU is giving to us through these accession talks as an incredible large space of know-how. And this makes the difference, I believe. And this is what makes the difference also for Moldova or for Ukraine, vis-à-vis other countries that have not this perspective, because where they find the know-how, who tells them how to build institutions, how to build accountability of the state vis-à-vis the citizens, who accompany them in this? Nobody. So this is our bless, to have the EU on our side and to have EU as part of our future. But it's not only this. In this moment in time, EU has made an incredible extra mile, completely against the odds, and I would say completely against its own tradition. And for the first time, EU has been able to think out of the box about the Western Balkans. And I'm talking about this new growth plan, which is an extra mile, because it opens up paths that previously were open only for member states. So it was a bit nothing or all. So you wanted this marriage, you had to endure the long time to wait, and then in the meantime you had nothing, or very small things. And I remember when I showed to Ursula and the others the facts, the data. So the per capita contribution of the EU to its own members in our region is 4,300 and something per year. The per capita contribution of the EU in our region is 138 euros. So you can imagine then how the trends and the forecasts are when it comes to the convergence. And after the crisis, after especially the pandemic, this became even more dramatic, because member states could use extra funds and incredible programs of support, while we were totally in the dry. So the new growth plan is an incredible opening up for a different way to look at the future, both from the EU and from us. And last but not least, I believe that within the EBRD and the EIB, there is something very important that we need to use, which is not the money, but it's the knowledge. And I very much hope that we'll get more in this, in terms of the knowledge on scaling up finance for innovation, of catalytic instruments and so on, because this is where we lack a lot of capacities. And for sure, if technology would not have come into our lives, our future would have been absolutely a no-go. And all this data of giving us this and that would mean nothing. Compared, of course, not to just us, but to the rest of Europe. But technology is our bless. Maybe it's a curse for Germany, because they have created such an incredible machine with papers that they have much more difficulty to turn in digital, being also German. But for us that have no big machines of bureaucracy to turn in something else, is just a clean slate. So we can start and do incredible jumps through the technology. And that's why it's needed, I think, a much more open door, both on EBRD and on EIB and on EU, of course, for supporting our transformation through technology, through the digital, through the artificial intelligence. And we have, of course, to do our job. We have to do our best, because as our beloved future bride has told us, it depends from you, so from us. Nothing comes for granted unless you are attacked by a superpower, and then you fuel some compassion, and then they get you in without really caring about the benchmarks. But if you are not attacked, you have to tick all the boxes. So I hope that we'll continue to be patient, we'll continue to be good-willing, and frankly, I'm not looking for a faster and not merit-based integration, because it would be like looking for a driving license without really knowing how to drive, and this would not be beneficial for the country. So I'm looking for a full trip with plenty of neuroticism. Of course, it goes without saying when you have to deal with the melancholic Brussels, but at the end, you should tick all the boxes and be ready, because it's for us. It's for our children. It's not for Brussels, it's not for Paris, it's not for Berlin, it's for us. And the EU is the driving force to build a democratic state. And this is something that would never happen in a region like ours, where the only state we saw was the Ottoman Empire, and we were the most peripheric point. And then we saw some versions of state that were from bad to worse, from fascist to Nazi to communist and to all this, but no institutions that would make the difference. So I think we have to count the blessings for having to deal with EU, and anytime we are angry with EU, because it's impossible to not be, we have to not forget that this is what we have, and nothing else will replace it. So it's a marriage, and it's not perfect, but it's what you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for your colorful analogies. And if you allow me to build on a metaphor, we'll move from a country that is still in the process of getting married to a country that is successfully married for over 10 years now. So, Governor Vujčić, the word to you.
Thank you. I'm representing a country that was the last one to join the European Union and the last one to join the Eurozone. So we have the most recent experience of all countries. Although the one on the EU is already quite old, it's 11 years. And when I became a deputy chief negotiator in 2005, first thing I did was I said, let me go to 3 countries of the European Union, which went through the negotiations, and learn how it was there. So I decided, I don't know why, but I decided to go to Portugal, to Czech Republic, and to Romania. So 3 different waves. And I found out that the process of the accession has changed all the time. Process of negotiations was much easier in the case of Portugal. I was asking, did you have to do this? Did you have, no, we didn't have to do it. It was just like, we would promise that we would do something and we would close the chapter. Then it was already more demanding in the case of Czech Republic, but still not very demanding. More demanding in the case of Romania. And then when we were starting the negotiations, suddenly the whole process changed, because the so-called benchmarks were introduced, so we had to fulfill more than 100 closing benchmarks and even around 30 opening benchmarks to open the negotiations in some chapters. So the process becomes more and more demanding as we move. This is something that I've learned. We started negotiations with Turkey. So I was sitting during the first phase of the negotiations with my good friend Ali Babacan all the time in the meetings in Brussels. And we were discussing on how that's going to go, etc. And that was interesting. At some point, Ali would not come to the meetings anymore. It was only me. But that also tells you something about the process of accession. It can start, but also stall or never finish. That I've learned through that process also. Now, process itself is actually useful. And I would say that this benchmarking system that now exists is actually also useful because it allows for more precise assessment of how you're progressing through the negotiations. And in the end, although we were complaining in the beginning, why do we have to do that, and nobody had to do it before us, in the end it turned out that it was a good thing to do. And it helped you to bring some things forward that you would probably do much later if you were not in the process of the negotiations and the accession. For example, as a central banker, I can tell that we aligned our legislation with the requirements basically for the euro adoption already then. So we had a fully aligned legislation not only for the EU entry but also for the euro adoption before we even entered into the EU, which in terms of for example, central bank independence is something that we central bankers like to have. It also helped us to cut the subsidies to the shipyards in Croatia, which we would have certainly not done if we were not in the process of the negotiations. And this is that one part of the acquis where accession into the EU really bites because it's the competition. The rest is very soft, and I often explain to students that people think if you get into the European Union, you transfer a lot of sovereignty to someone else in Brussels. In reality, you don't. Almost nothing. You have 4 freedoms, okay, but you have most of the 4 freedoms even before you get into the European Union. One thing is a competition. That's the really one where you feel it. The rest is very actually very soft. And even if people think about accession to the large market, with many people, true. But as an economist, if you look at the free trade agreements that you have before, they take care of 90-something% of that already. So at the moment when you enter, we had to, I think, we were calculating the tariffs that were, or trade restrictions that were eliminated were less than 5% of all our foreign trade. But then when you get in, and that was interesting, as an economist I was looking at it with the curiosity. Once we joined, suddenly exports start to grow. And we turned from 10 years before, history of being a current account deficit country, immediately in a year after joining the European Union, into the current account surplus country. And not to mention current plus capital account surplus because of the flows of the funds from the EU. And then I was wondering why, because in terms of the trade restrictions, there was nothing removed. And then I remembered then when I studied in the US and in the international trade department, there was a paper presented by a Canadian economist which was called "How Wide is the Border?" And actually, the borders are wider than you think, in a sense that it's not a tariff, it's not all kinds of trade restrictions. It's the fact that there is a border that is an obstacle to trade. And then I looked at the Croatian companies which increased the exports to the EU market. These were mostly SMEs. Large companies, nothing happened in particular in the first 2 years. It was SMEs which started to boom. And then I went to those people into a few companies to ask them what happened, because no tariffs were eliminated, nothing, and suddenly they export and they were not exporting before. And then they would tell me, look, we work with somebody in Munich as a supplier. They ask us to have a delivery just in time, which means we have to be there on Thursday at 3 p.m. Not before, not after that, with our delivery. If we are late, we pay penalty and we lose future contract. we're a small company. We cannot have a warehouse in Germany where we stock things and then distribute from there. We send a truck. And in the border, you never know. It can get late. So these are the things that are not in the economist textbooks, but are actually there on the ground. And this is how wide is the border. Border is actually wider than you think. You think that through free trade agreements you eliminate. For example, that was the paper was looking at the Canada-US, why there's more trade within US, and it's a NAFTA. It's a free trade area. And then when my friends from UK had a discussion on where to live, some of them invited me to talk about it in London. I did with no success, but I was telling them this is exactly what will happen to you once you exit. The border will become wider than you think, and those that will be hurt will be SMEs, mostly, not large companies, SMEs. And this is exactly what happened after that. So EU is definitely a good thing. Our experience is good. Also, it gives a lot of credibility for the investors. That's an important thing, as well as the entry into the Eurozone, which comes later. And I'm going to go to talk to Bulgarian Parliament later this month, again, promoting why this thing might be a good thing for a country.
Thank you, Governor, and also thank you for your insightful commentary, also in these fascinating examples about the SMEs and the impact on exports. We'll gradually transition now to the European Commission side. So, Director General Koopman, the word to you for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, EIB, for having us. Thank you for hosting this panel. It's a very important discussion, and my job has been made very easy by the previous speakers, who I think in different ways have illustrated the transformative power of enlargement, from the trade facilitation that doesn't figure in the trade textbooks to the power that it has to transform institutions, the point made by the Prime Minister, to the growth-boosting effects about which President Renaud Bassot spoke. I mean, let me add a few considerations to this debate. I think the first point to make is a political point. Enlargement is back. I think Prime Minister Rama was being very polite when he made the analogy of the wedding. Actually, there is this old and well-worn joke that the countries were pretending to reform, and we were pretending that we wanted them to join. It's a variant of the marriage analogy. I think that's over. That's really over, and it's over for obvious reasons. I think the next speaker will no doubt talk about that more. But the geostrategic, geopolitical context has changed dramatically, so we're taking it seriously. Don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean that we're somehow throwing the merit-based principle out of the window. On the contrary, it has to be done together. So that's my first point. It's back and it's necessary, and I think everyone is beginning to realize this. Secondly, enlargement now is also a very different process from what it was previously. I thought it was very interesting to listen to the governor's comparisons of the different waves, but there are a few obvious differences. One is simply that the EU integration itself has deepened enormously, so the acquis has grown tremendously, and therefore the work of actually joining the EU is much tougher now than it was 30 years ago. But secondly, I think we have all come to the realization that this binary model where you negotiate for a decade, if you're unlucky, or if you're lucky, depending on your perspective, and then you get nothing, and then you join and you get everything. This model isn't fit for the times we live in. And that has been changing quite dramatically, I think, not so much by design, but by practice and empirics. If we take the example of the countries in the East, which we call the trio, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, we actually didn't think they would be joining the EU for a long time, and therefore they were afforded deep and comprehensive free trade agreements, which already provided them with the opportunity to integrate bits and pieces of the internal market, provided they aligned with the necessary rules. Actually, now what we see is, with the enlargement perspective, they are ahead in this regard of the Western Balkans that have been working so hard for so long. So one of the ideas behind the growth plan, which you have referred to, is to ensure that the Western Balkans have the same possibilities as the countries in the East in terms of acceding to important parts of the internal market that can boost growth. And I think that's very, very important because it sustains the reform momentum, which is very significant, and it gives a real perspective to businesses and citizens in the countries that this enlargement process is actually beneficial before it finally formally happens. So the progressive integration is there. It's underpinning a lot of the thinking in the growth plan. But the growth plan for the Western Balkans is also modeled on the idea of acceleration, to make the reforms a condition for payments, to make sure that these reforms happen faster than they have happened in the past, because we do not have the luxury of waiting too long. And the reforms themselves are also highly beneficial. And with these reforms come significant additional funding, which will be plowed back into investments to 50% of the envelopes, and there the role of the EIB and the EBRD is going to be absolutely critical to make sure that the money is well spent. Now, in the East, of course, we are looking at a very different situation, a country at war, where we fortunately managed last week to get the multi-annual financial framework agreed, which affords a significant increase in funding for Ukraine. But if I look at it more generally, 75% of the additional funding in the MFF is for the neighborhood and for accession. So the priority is very clearly expressed in the money. We always say that you need to put your money where your mouth is, and actually I think that is what the leaders have done. And then earlier this week, the legal framework, the Ukraine facility, was agreed. And now we're ready to move forward very rapidly to provide a 4-year perspective, an anchor for the economy to grow. Because what unites, I think, our thinking on the Western Balkans and the facility there and Ukraine is that both groups cannot advance to accession unless they grow much faster. And here I want to draw an analogy with the previous enlargement waves. If you look at the growth in Central and Eastern Europe in the first enlargement waves, you just see how transformative it was. A country like the Baltics grew 400% in 20 years. Trade between the then EU member states and the new member states in the East in the 2004 enlargement increased during the accession process by 300% in a decade. Those are numbers which change societies dramatically. And they come on the back of the reforms, the investments, and obviously also the changes in the way societies function. So that is what we need to replicate, I think, in our present generation of enlargement countries. That's very much the thinking the Commission is espousing, and we need that well before they actually join, because without that, these countries are put at the mercy of a very unstable world. So I think 2004 will be a year of delivery of concrete economic benefits through these facilities, and we'll also be working with Georgia and Moldova, but also a year where the accession process, in the more formal sense of the word, accelerates, where we will hopefully be advancing the negotiations much more speedily than we have done in the past. And the two go hand in hand, because at the end of the day, the accession process is similar to updating or rewriting the operating system of your economy, so the operating system of your computer, to put a new operating system in that is much more powerful and performing economically and societally than the system you have at this juncture. And that is really what unites the economic program that we're pushing and the accession process with the negotiations now moving ahead dramatically. I think if I can conclude with one observation, in the past we've seen periods where the accession process stalled, where enthusiasm waned, and that is a pitfall we simply cannot afford. We cannot afford this time around. This has to be a success. There really isn't a plan B. And that comes also with big challenges for ourselves, because obviously integrating a large number of new member states will mean that the union will change. So there are also reforms we will need to undertake, and we are focused on that. Therefore, I think, in conclusion, that the new institutional cycle that will start this year will be very much about enlargement and the countries around the union for geostrategic and geopolitical reasons, but also simply because the countries deserve it and will all be much better off if we succeeded. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General, also for this very insightful stat on 76% of the MFF increase going to enlargement. Actually, it's a new data point for me, and I think it's a very encouraging us for all of us here. So last but not least, Deputy Governor Nikolaichuk, welcome first of all to Brussels. You know, the road from Ukraine is a long one. The road to integration, road to Brussels, a long one. Literally in your case, it takes you almost 30 hours to get from Kiev to Luxembourg. So I'm very, very privileged to give the word to you and for your opening remarks.
First of all, thank you very much, organizers, for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about the accession negotiations in this panel. Of course, for being able to talk here about the enlargement, I also have to thank our armed forces who have been defending us for 714 days already in Russia's full-scale war, which is taking place on the territory of our country but affects the whole world. And of course, I also would like to thank our European partners who support us, first by providing the military, humanitarian and financial assistance, in particular the MFA in the amount of 18 billion euros last year, and this new package, Ukraine facility of 50 billion euros other 4 years, backed by European Council last week. Also, the enlarged support from IFIs such as the EIB and the EBRD has to be highlighted as well. And of course, secondly, through facilitating institutional reforms and integration into the EU. This EU integration embodies our long-standing fight for European principles. And Ukraine's Maidan in 2013 was pivotal, affirming our European direction and provoking aggression from neighbors who reject EU values. 10 years ago, when we signed the association agreement with the EU, we clearly understood that we had a distant prospect of membership. However, even signing the agreement, after signing the agreement, we accelerated our transformation towards the European system and practices. We have consistently brought Ukrainians' dream of joining the EU closer, with European optimism only growing stronger over the decade. Actually, recent polls show that if a referendum on EU accession were held today, about 80% of Ukrainians would vote in favor, with only 5% opposed. Sure, full-scale war has complicated the life of our country significantly. Yet, despite the war, so we have continued to adopt European legislation and more diligently than ever do our homework. So we completed the candidacy questionnaire in a very short time. We conducted a large-scale self-audit of our national legislation for compliance with EU standards and prepared for constructive membership talks. War has become a powerful catalyst and incentive for Ukraine's European integration efforts. And actually, in the same way, we can witness EU's own transformation and evolution, marked by debates on enlargement, reform, and its global role, as it was already noticed by Mr. Koopman. And the Russia invasion of Ukraine became the trigger for EU. While Ukrainian authorities have shown their resilience and efficiency amid a full-scale war, EU governance has demonstrated their courage, flexibility, open-mindedness in work and decision-making under extreme conditions. And the prime example is the European Council recent decision on the Ukraine facility, achieved despite the opposition from some member states. We sincerely welcome the EU enlargement path and the decision to first grant us candidacy and more recently to open EU membership talks. I am pleased to note that a large number of EU citizens are open-minded on Ukraine's accession to the EU, as evidenced by multi-country opinion poll on EU enlargement, published recently by the European Council on Foreign Relations. This is also a testament of the unwavering European support for Ukraine. I am convinced that to the European community, Ukraine's accession is not only about expanding the borders and strengthening the EU's potential by increasing the total size of its human capital and other resources, or by opening new markets. It is also about reinforcing the potential of civil society through shared values currently upheld by Ukraine on the battlefield. Ukraine shares the EU strategic goals and has already made progress in many areas, despite ongoing warfare. We aim to become a successful country with an innovative economy, a liberal market, efficient public institutions, digital governance, a strong civil society and democratic tradition, a reliable and predictable contributor to security on the continent. So definitely we understand that for that, we have to fill all our boxes. Moreover, we would like to repeat the success of our neighbors, of our predecessors from the Central and Eastern Europe, which have been the prominent drivers of economic growth in EU over the last 2 decades, which was already mentioned today. Of course, we are aware of all complexities of the European integration process. We know that accession negotiations can take years, but we hope that in this new wave of enlargement, it will be much faster than during the previous years for many other countries, and that both sides will do their best for that. For instance, 2 weeks ago, Mr. Koopman assured us that 1,000 experts from the European Commission will devote all their efforts to the screening of Ukrainian legislation. For our part, we are doing everything possible and impossible to achieve the goal of gaining EU membership under any circumstances. Achieving the results under any circumstances has become our motto over the past 2 years. Unfortunately, we have no alternatives.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. We concluded this opening round of opening remarks, so we'll continue with some follow-up questions. There is one thing I was really impressed by the fantastic organizer from EIB to stick on time. So I'll also kindly ask, given the time left, the distinguished speakers to limit the following interventions to about 5 minutes each. Okay, but we'll stay with you, Deputy Governor, if I may. So. Your institution, the Ukrainian Central Bank, has done tremendously well throughout this crisis. So you dealt with some of the toughest challenges, and I think it will be a surprise to many people in this audience. Actually, Ukraine has a fully functioning banking system. The foreign exchange reserves on monetary side have been at 29 billion before the start of the full-scale invasion. They are over 40 billion now. The inflation is stabilized at 5%, so you really dealt with that challenge. So now you have this other challenge in front of you, the challenge of European integration, which is not an easy road. So thinking of that, what are the key chapters, the key negotiation fields that you see as the most challenging for institutions on this path of EU integration?
Yes, as I already noticed, so we already analyzed our legislation against EU standards, reviewing around 28,000 EU regulations and determined for ourselves, the priority areas. And of course, also EU enlargement report also helped us to determine the priorities. But at the same time, in my capacity representing the central bank, I would like to address more specific challenges in the financial sector for which we have the objective reasons. Actually, first, I would like to repeat Governor Vujčić's words that we now, have completely different targets and tasks in the financial sector area compared with our predecessors. The comprehensive development of financial regulation in EU to enhance sector resilience, especially boosted by financial crisis and financial innovations, sets a bright example of this moving target and presents significant challenge for us. I may confirm that since the last enlargement wave, EU's financial law has been significantly modernized. Second, the war impacts our financial sector hard, necessitating tough actions to maintain macro-financial stability. For instance, we have been strongly relying on capital controls and some prudential relaxations since the beginning of the war, and definitely that complicates a lot our progress under the chapters free movement of capital and the financial services. But as conditions allow, we ease the restrictions in accordance with the FX liberalization roadmap developed together with the IMF assistance and bring our prudential regulations back to normal. Also, despite these wartime challenges, we are progressing in aligning the regulations, our regulations with the EU's standards, especially in the areas where we are not restrained by the wartime circumstances. I would like also to highlight that our efforts in financial reform aim beyond mere compliance, serving as a foundation for modernization and fortifying, strengthening our financial sector's resilience. While the wartime efficiency of our reformed banking sector has exceeded the expectations, we acknowledge that the need for ongoing modernization to enhance the financial sector's role in economic recovery. This is explicitly outlined in our updated last year financial strategy of Ukrainian financial sector development, with many measures focused on aligning our regulations with EU laws, particularly under the free movement of capital and financial services chapters. Besides, in addressing the Chapter 17, Economic and Monetary Policy, before the full-scale war, we have made strong effort in aligning central bank law with EU standards, notably in strengthening central bank independence and prohibiting monetary financing. However, in 2022, due to the war's impact on the budget needs, the central bank took decisive steps for support of the budget military expenses via monetary financing, while planning to mitigate and prevent future consequences. The plan involved enhancing fiscal monetary coordination, which helped restore the domestic debt market, avoid budget monetary financing in 2023, and stabilize the currency. As a result, inflation dropped from a peak of 27% in 2022 to a pre-war target of 5%. The unity and commitment to central bank independence among Ukrainian authorities, even during the wartime, were an important element of these anti-crisis measures. So we are in the ongoing talks with the European Commission and the ECB on the central bank independence, aiming to full compliance with the EU standards. That is also a good example of our efforts to enhance our relations with EU partners to facilitate our euro integration. We aspire for full integration into the European Central Bank and then financial regulatory community. We are grateful for the support from the European Commission, ECB, EBA, EIB, EBRD, the central banks of the EU member states and candidates like Croatia and Albania. We definitely benefit a lot from the advice we receive, for example, from our friends from the Croatian central banks. Recently, we have sought advice from those recently involved in the EU Commission screenings, and the Central Bank of Albania being notably responsive, and we will meet with the experts next week. Moreover, anticipating the challenges of membership negotiations, the NBU has prepared for the future internal and external interactions, optimizing our internal processes. Again, here I may refer to the advice we received from our Croatian colleagues, and that led to forming the dedicated working group to steer our European integration, comprising leaders and experts familiar with EU procedures, tasked with establishing the effective connection between the NBU and EU authorities. So let me conclude by following. The NBU is fully committed to implement its mandate under any circumstances, even during the full-scale war. That is explicitly reflected in our updated strategy. And facilitating the way to EU membership is definitely the part of this mandate. And NBU's commitments and efforts are good representation of those of the whole country in this Euro integration journey.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor. And I know you're heading to Brussels from here, so all the best on your full agenda there. The work is already happening. Thank you. And I'll kindly pass the word to Governor Vujčić. You have a unique perspective. You've worked for European Commission, you've been Deputy Chief Negotiator, now you're the Governor of the National Bank. So tell us, what can be the role of the already successful countries in helping the aspiring ones?
I think that we should obviously be engaged in helping countries who are now in the process of accession to do that as best as possible. As Sergei has said, we are helping as much as we can in terms of the technical assistance. Croatian National Bank has, I think, over the last 10 years established itself as a hub for the technical assistance in the region of the Western Balkans. We had 44 twinning programs, which basically means 4 twinning programs per year, with Bosnia and Herzegovina, with Serbia, with Montenegro, with North Macedonia, and we're looking forward to extending our work into Albania. We're working now with the Central Bank of Ukraine. We have, for example, last year we have sent 116 TAIEX experts into different countries, which brings us to a second country in the EU by number of experts that we send into for the technical assistance. And if you normalize by the size of the population, I think we're by far the first one. And we intend to continue with that. We have now very good teams. We have lots of experience. And basically, anything that has been moving towards the Western Balkans in the last 10 years was going through the Croatian National Bank in the area of our expertise, of course, which is monetary policy, supervision, financial stability, etc. We even sent permanent representatives in some countries, for example, in Montenegro, where we had work on the supervision, and we intend to continue to do so. So, Sergei, Prime Minister, whenever you need something, we are there to help them as much as we can. And then there are other institutions who will finance, like ODIL and the EIB. But we can always put experts and our knowledge into the process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Governor, also for keeping your remarks so short, but also for everything you do. Actually, it's very interesting that Croatia is punching above its weight to such an extent by being so active in these technical assistance programs. So, staying on the topic of help and how can we help these countries. So, Director General, back to you in terms of what can the European Commission do for the countries of Western Balkans, for the trio, and what is the implication on the MFF of this help?
Well, as we have discussed, I think the MFF is giving us the necessary funding to set up the 2 facilities for the Western Balkans and for Ukraine that are necessary economically speaking, that will drive the accession process faster. But at the same time, the enlargement process itself is critical, and there we need to invest. I like the reference to TAIEX and twinning, massive support to the countries to actually do this. In the 2000s, we had the then member states sending many of their civil servants to the then acceding countries. And I think the spirit of the 2000s needs to be brought back, certainly for countries that have smaller administrations like the one you know best, dear moderator. So that's the second thing. I think for Moldova and Georgia, we are working very closely to see how we can also support them on these 2 tracks. Moldova also being a country that, like Ukraine, is entering the negotiations. There is some additional funding in the MFF. Funding remains scarce, of course, so we need to use it wisely. Georgia, still a candidate status. The big challenge for Georgia this year is to do the necessary reforms to move to the next phase, which is to also become a negotiating country. So, as you see, plenty of work across the piece. We have 6 negotiating countries right now, and hopefully we can accelerate this, and by the end of this year have a few in addition, and the others moving forward in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we'll go back to Prime Minister Rama. So look, knowing your colorful remarks, I cannot start without a football analogy. So Albania qualified early from their group to the Euro Cup, qualified as the first in the group actually. Also beat my native Moldova 2-0, which was a little bit painful, but it was a beautiful game. And also to cite Chancellor Scholz, Albania is the front runner in the process of EU accession. So in that light, would appreciate your perspective, how can EU and international financiers help countries like Albania that are aspiring to join the EU?
First of all, you asked us to stick to the time, and it's quite an ask, because who can stick to the time here, Ukrainians cannot, because it depends from their enemies. EBRD cannot, depends from their very long procedures. EU cannot, depends from 27 elections multiplied by 4 in 4 years. Albania cannot, because it depends from all of them. So, but I'll try to stick on time. And I just want to say first that I'm truly honored from the offer of the best European and global central banker. It's not me saying it, but the governor was awarded I'm really honored by offer to help Albania, and I have to tell my Ukrainian friend who was not happy with the Albanian Central Bank that it makes 2 of us. Let's ask for the help of the governor to see how we can improve the stand of our central bank. And when it comes to football, listen, we understand what does it mean to be beaten, because we have gone through it a lot. So I sympathize with you, and for once we won. But when it comes to the front runners and the front runner, I don't buy this, because for a long time I was told that Serbia was the front runner and Montenegro was the front runner, and now we are told Albania is the front runner. So we are all running, and the front is changing. But you never know who will be the first to arrive, because it's not a road that you know where it ends. It's a road that ends when and where you decide. So it's like entering a marathon and you are told it's 52 kilometers, but at the end it's not 52 kilometers. It may be 100, 150, 1,000. The important, because the finish, you run towards the finish and the finish is taken away from you because they have to make their mind. And it's not one mind, it's 27. So it doesn't matter. We will make our run and will not lose our patience, even in some years will not be the front runners, but maybe, I don't know, Bosnia will be the front runner, who knows? Moldova, who knows? So doesn't matter. As I said, I strongly believe that this is a great exercise for us and not for EU, for us. And more we are in this run, more we learn, more we adopt, more we understand how the world works, and more we will be able to build institutions. What makes Croatian Central Bank a stunning example is that it's an institution, and it's an institution that now has so much power and has so much to share with the others. So this is where we should aim to go in all the range of our institutions, and this is a very, very difficult exercise because you're never taught to think about institutions. You're always taught to think about persons, about the will of forces that were bringing us in different directions, but never in the direction we wanted. And for the first time, we have made this choice. We want to be part of the European Union, and this is a choice that we will. And I'll conclude by taking from the governor memory of Ali Babacan and his start with Turkey, because it brought to my mind an opinion about what makes the difference between a pro-enlargement optimist and a pro-enlargement pessimist. Because in Albania we're all Euro-optimists. This is out of discussion. And so the division is between who is more optimistic about enlargement that will happen in one day, and who is more pessimistic. So the pro-enlargement optimists, they say Turkey will enter EU when Albania will have the presidency. And the pessimists say Albania will enter EU when Turkey will have the presidency. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. We feel, we are not EU, but we are E without you. So being European, nobody takes it from us, and nobody can change it because we are just in the middle. And even the word enlargement is a bit, I think, misplaced, because you have something in your stomach, and you have simply to make it work together with your body. And you don't enlarge, you simply integrate, you simply unify. And it's not a good idea to keep something in your stomach that is not integrated with your body, because one day it can blow your whole body. So finally it was understood, and it's very sad that it was understood, because Russia has had to give the contribution to make the people in the EU understand. So they could understand it without Putin helping them by bombing Ukraine. But whatever, now it's understood that the Western Balkan is for EU as important as EU is for the Western Balkan. Not for the same reasons, but first and foremost for the main reason of unity and security and a future where this part of the stomach will not be taken hostage by malicious tumors. And there are many that can happen if the full integration will not happen. So not looking for an obese Europe by enlarging, but looking for a more fit Europe by integrating. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And if I may, as a Moldovan, I'll say that Moldova would be delighted to join the European Union when Albania has a presidency. And it's encouraging for me that Albania starts with an A. So,
the presidency will take Moldova in no matter it takes. And we can kidnap the others and put them in a room and then decide together and then say it's decided. But you have to wait for it. You know?
Okay, and by the way, we're doing not too bad on time, I have to say. So, Madam President, don't feel the pressure. We're fine on time. And if I may say a few words about your personal role. So, thank you for your personal leadership and championship over your organization. I lost count of the number of times you've traveled to Kiev, to Ukraine. You've seen things on the ground, not from the only from the London office, And you've deployed more than 3 billion, if I have it right, over the last 2 years since the full-scale invasion. So you've achieved tremendous impact, and EBRD has been crucial for the prior enlargement wave in the 2000s, and EBRD is crucial again. In that light, maybe you can tell us what does it entail for EBRD and what is the role of EBRD in this next enlargement process for the neighboring countries?
No, thank you. And first of all, I think that the conversation was very interesting in showing the new dynamic on enlargement. And I think that's very important because, as I explained, I think it has been key in the development of Eastern and Central Europe. Of course, we played a role, but I think the EU accession has really been a key driver. And when we see now this new window of opportunity, very much related to geopolitical perspective, which has completely changed, I think, the perspective on enlargement, I think we need to work all together to make it to become a reality and avoiding being, further slippages and fatigue. And so speediness of implementation and the determination in the implementation will be very important. And I think that this is, from our perspective as investors, it's completely having the perspective of the EU accession being a reality and not only a long-term perspective, a natural evolution that nobody knows when it will come, is very important to put the countries on the map, to create confidence from interest from international investors that, okay, we invest there, it will be part of the EU internal market and so forth. And what has been said about the frontiers and the barriers it creates is absolutely true. So being part of the EU creates a different perspective of whether you invest in Albania, in Ukraine, in Slovakia or elsewhere. So that giving reality to that, and when we talk to international investors, it's a huge difference. So that's one element. The other element is what we need to do is also to prepare the private sector of these countries to be ready to get the benefits of the internal market and benefits to access this huge EU market, which creates a lot of opportunity. And that's why where digitalization and new technologies will create new opportunities in a context where countries in, for example, Western Balkans have huge demographic challenge. So I think that's where we see this new perspective and so forth beyond the transformation reform agenda and so forth is also a change of perspective on how we see the economies and creating economic opportunities. Of course, it's a daunting task, and what has been said about the acquis and so forth, it's a huge effort. It's when you see the package of regulations that have to be taken on board and so forth. So that's where also we can provide support. We are very much supporting Ukraine with Ukraine reform architecture, which is not financing investments, but gathering donor support and funding in order to finance expertise and we do that the same in Moldova, enhance administrative capacity to undertake these huge efforts of enlargement, regulatory changes, and so forth, and so forth. And this is one important dimension I think that we need to be focused on, because it's essential for the pace of the process, and it's also essential for the credibility of the process. Because one of the risks with all the procedures, you have the right regulation and so forth, but nothing is implemented. So if really to change to enhance the institutional setting, and that Rama was talking about, you need to not only have the law but implement them in the right manner, and so that's part of where we can also help. So I will, I think that we are, the change of perspective on enlargement and the stronger determination and clearer perspective is absolutely key in the way, both the new candidate and the existing candidate can transform and evolve. Consistency in the trajectory will be important. It's a huge effort, a huge responsibility on the EU and the member states in order to be able to deliver what they are committing to do. It's also a huge effort on the countries because, of the reform agenda that goes together with the transformation. But as EBRD, at our level, I think we will do everything we can to finance. We try to accelerate our procedures. Sometimes we have standards to respect, which is fine. But I think that, both in terms of investment and policy reform, we will play our role. We have a lot of people in the ground knowing very well the countries and being really able to contribute to this agenda.
Thank you very much. Look, it leaves me only to actually go back to Governor Vujčić's remark about those Croatian SMEs that had to deliver their goods to Munich just in time, not earlier, not later, just in time. And our panel is just in time. Actually, there's 2 minutes left, enough for me to thank the organizers. So thank you, EIB team, for this tremendous event and for this panel. It's such an important panel on such an important topic of enlargement. So Vice President Czerwinska, thank you for having us here. And thank you for your personal leadership. I'm also seeing President Werner Hoyer. Thank you for your personal leadership and for everything you did for Ukraine and Moldova by this EU4U facility. Thank you very much. And thank you to our wonderful panelists today. I think for a panel at noon, which is the toughest panel, everybody will agree, for a panel at noon, that was a very insightful, very high energy, and very optimistic panel. So it's a very optimistic panel. I'm concluding, being highly optimistic about the future of the future enlargement crisis. Europe has always come together in moments of crisis, and this crisis doesn't have to be let to go to a waste. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vasil. Thank you, dear panelists. And you set out to be bold and insightful, and I think this panel will definitely be remembered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and as you know,